We're live.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 2015 edition of Essos2Westeros, a critical view of the one and only HBO mega show, Game of Thrones. I'm joined by the High Sparrow himself, all the way from Florida, Josh Miller. Josh, how are you this fine evening?
Thank you, my lord. Thank you.
Yes, I'm.
My lord, not mid-lord, because that's the low common tongue.
So you're saying that you're an equal?
No, I'm saying I'm higher than you, because I'm speaking in the proper tongue, whereas you would speak in, for sure, low tongue, low Valyrian.
Of course I would. Well, it's good to see you again, Josh. Last time we did this was
The Red Wedding.
Yeah, the last year at this time, and that's
2 years ago.
okay. So it's been a while. I thought it was last year.
I don't think we did one for season 4, which is a shame, because that was a fantastic season.
Right. Well, I think it had its ups and downs. I think overall, before going into this season, you and I said that I think the beginning of the show or the series was kind of front loaded. A lot of the episodes were jam packed and I think a lot more heavy hitting. Obviously, it's a new show and it's going to generate a lot of buzz than maybe the latter two seasons. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, for sure. I think the show's going to pick up only bigger, but I think it's going to get a lot more interesting because now that we're getting out of the books, people don't know what's to come. So I think even more people are going to tune in because you can't say, oh, well, I know this is coming. You don't know what's coming. So that even makes it more exciting.
Well, I think that if you look at just the overall best episodes of the series, you point to that ninth episode of each of the seasons, starting with Baelor in season 1, where Ned gets his head chopped off, okay, and then in season 2, obviously in episode 9 was Blackwater, in season 3 Reigns of Castamere, the Red Wedding, and season 4, correct me if I'm wrong, Mountain and the Viper.
No, that was episode 8. Episode 9 was Watchers on the Wall, where it was the battle with Jon Snow. Episode 8 was Mountain and the Viper with the big fight.
Right. So I mean, those two episodes were pretty good. I don't know if I take the Watchers on the Wall episode and compare that or put that on the same pedestal as a Baelor or as a Blackwater.
Well, I've actually rewatched Watchers on the Wall a few times. Okay. At first, when I saw it, I wasn't in love with it. No, it's not on the level of Baelor. Like, it's not an episode I would go back to and say, wow, this is a great episode. But I will say, I think the Watchers on the Wall, out of the 40 episodes I guess 43 episodes they've done so far, Watchers on the Wall is a top 10 for me.
Who directed that episode? It wasn't Neil Marshall, right? That directed the other...
Yeah, it was.
Oh, right. They brought him back.
Right. They brought him back to do Watchers on the Wall.
Right. Okay.
Which was a good episode. Rightfully so.
So I tweeted out the link that we are live, the YouTube link.
Yes.
So if anybody is coming on in the next 3 seconds, which I highly doubt, but if they do come on and want to join, we will send out another link as well. So going into this season, obviously there was a lot of buzz surrounding the show and was going to definitely eclipse 10 million viewers per episode, which is pretty insane. You and I are both Sopranos fans. Like, that's #1 show all time. You and I, it's safe to say, for those that don't know us, we know a thing or two about the Sopranos, and I took the Sopranos tour, which was great. So I saw a bunch of sites in New York and New Jersey, and that was a lot of fun. There's your hat, Bada Bing hat, from the Bada Bing, which is Satin Doll Strip Club, which it was part of the tour, which was great. I thought that was very again, and it was live in there. But we won't go into that any further. But going back to the numbers, I believe HBO came out with a statement, Josh, correct me if I'm wrong, that said that they're the most watched show now. I know technology has changed and there's a lot of places to watch Game of Thrones and shows on now, but I think it's the most watched show. Is that the wording?
Yeah, I mean, Game of Thrones is huge. It grows with every episode. I actually don't know if it's bigger than, I know last season broke the record with Mockingbird. I don't know if this season's broken that record. I'm going to actually go look that up real quick. But But yeah, I don't know.
Think well, they got over 10 million viewers that watched the premiere for this season a couple weeks ago.
But the question is that more than Mockingbird, which set the?
I think it was. I think, yeah, double fact check that, but I'm pretty sure that was. And what kind of got, I'm not a huge fantasy guy, to be honest, but the storylines of just this whole thing, if you're someone out there that likes shows where you have murder, mystery, a whole bunch of interesting characters and things may not move as fast as they do in other shows like Oz on HBO or Sopranos, and well, some Sopranos episodes were slow, but I get the feeling that this show just sucks you in because like you're rooting for one of the families and you're hoping the other families kind of fall to the basement, if you will. So.
I disagree. I totally disagree with that. First off, before I go on why I disagree with you, you're right. The Wars to Come, which is the premiere episode this season, was the most watched episode now. So that beat out Mockingbird. I don't think the other episodes have beat it, but The Wars to Come has been the highest episode. But, okay, I disagree because I'm rooting for everyone. And I think that's what makes the show more interesting. Whereas other shows I watch, I am just rooting for one faction or one group to beat out the other group. In this one, for instance, you take the Lannisters. Obviously, they're supposed to be the bad guys, but I like Tyrion Lannister. I think you like Tyrion Lannister, but I'm also rooting for the Starks, and I'm also rooting for Theon, and I'm also rooting for Daenerys, and they're all competing against each other, but I'm all rooting for them. Whereas in a show like Oz, I don't know if I was rooting for Vern Schillinger and the Aryans to beat out Beecher. Right. I can root for everyone in this show. I'm not rooting for one show to fail. And even they say the Lannisters are the bad guys. Other than Cersei at this point, are you not rooting for Jaime?
Well, I like the ensemble cast, and there's certain things you like about characters, and there's certain things you don't. I think the creators, and obviously George R.R. Martin, who penned the books, obviously he goes very very in depth with all of these characters, at least the ones that you see on the show.
In the books, are you rooting for certain families over other families? Like, obviously you're rooting for the Starks, but are you not rooting for Tyrion? I thought you were.
I never said I wasn't rooting for him, but I said what drew people in in the beginning was the fact that you had all these families pitted up against each other, and it was kind of like an all-out bloodbath kind of towards the end of season 1 that was building up until season 2 into season 3. I thought that was a hook. I'm talking about the hook for the audience. Why do you think the show attracted so many people then in the beginning who knew nothing about the books? Because of the trailer?
Season 1, you mean? Like season 1 on?
Right.
Well, HBO.
Why did people watch Game of Thrones more than they watched Leftovers, True Blood in the beginning?
Well, True Blood in the beginning, I don't know about that. I think True Blood in the beginning might have had pretty high numbers, but over Game of Thrones in the beginning.
Not now. Even though that's over.
Not now. I'm talking about the beginning. I'd have to fact check that. But I think two things. First off, it had a built-in base already. But that didn't really bring people. What brought people was the advertising and HBO and the fact that every episode kind of ended on a cliffhanger. The first episode ended on Bran falling out the window. Second episode ended with him waking up. Third episode, I forget what that ended with, but it just kept going. I mean, people love cliffhangers. People love HBO. People love quality. And Game of Thrones brought it all. Brings it all.
So this season, we're fast forwarding a bit. Obviously, it's a show that is internationally acclaimed. A lot of people watch this show all over the world and obviously broadcast in many different languages. And the book's obviously written in many different languages and dialects as well. But I will say that, I have the feeling that, okay, it's season 5. There's some, which we'll go into a little bit more detail, but just talking generalities right now. I know you're a proponent of somebody who likes to see a series done maybe in its 6th, 7th season, and it's season 5. And I think many people who are familiar with the books, and I'm one of them that read the books, and you did not, but you get the sense, like, is there an end in sight? Are they going to just wrap this up in like 3 episodes in the 7th season when it's all said and done? That's what scares me. What's your kind of feeling on kind of in this season, in season 5? Are you seeing any ending in sight.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the producers of Benioff and Weiss, the creators, have come out and said of the show, have come out and said they want to do it in 7 seasons. I mean, obviously HBO and George R. R. Martin's pushing for much, much longer. They'd love it to never end, but I definitely see an end in sight. I mean, to me, there's always been there's two climaxes to the show, and that's number one, Dany comes over to Westeros with her dragons, and it looks like that's coming to fruition at one point. And the second one is the White Walkers and some sort of invasion with them. And it seems like that they're pushing toward that. So I definitely see an end in sight. I think this is going to be a 7-season show. Obviously I haven't read the books, but I can already see that it's starting to come to a point where can they really push it any further than that? I mean, there's a lot of shows out there, David. I watch a lot of them. And the reality is, most shows that go to 7 seasons start to wear thin. The Sopranos, I mean, if it did one more season, it may have been great, but it might not have been.
I would have still been watching. I think the rest of them
I
would have been watching that.
I still would have been watching too, but there's a lot of shows that run out of steam. They just don't have the stories anymore. And, I hope that's not for Game of Thrones, but I worry it might be. I don't think it will be, because I think they are going to come to a conclusion. I think the producers have in their minds that's what they want to do. And I do see an end in sight. I mean, with Tyrion joining with Dany, I mean, Dany can't stay in Marine any longer. She's got to move on. And I think that's season 6. I just can't. If Dany stays in Essos in season 6,
right.
I feel that they're going to be. I feel like they've been spinning their wheels in that house. They've been spinning their wheels with that story for 3 seasons now, and they need to pull it back. You know, season 2 that she went to Karth, and season 3 she went to Yunkai. I forget the other city in Marine, and now she needs to go to Westeros. And if she still is in Essos by this time next season, I feel the show has failed. Because the one thing about a show is if it's not moving forward, then it's dead. We don't need to see her anymore. Like, for instance, we're not seeing Bran this season, which I'm fine with, They don't have a story for him. They can push a story to the next season or even season 7, which is I'm fine with that.
Given the number of actors and actresses that are on screen, that's okay.
Right. It's a good
line. Some people might not like, as much as a Varys or a Littlefinger or Tyrion.
Right. I totally get that, why they're pushing him aside. But Dany, again, she's been in this funk. Now, I think they will move her story along, and I don't think she's going anywhere. She's always going to be in the show because she's a very important part of the show. But, again, they can't push it out to a season 8 or 9 because what would they do in a season 8 or 9?
Right.
I mean, how many years is she going to spend in this one place? I mean, how much bigger do her dragons have to be before she eventually goes and invades?
I think eventually, though, they got to move it forward where by the end of this season, at least, I would love to see her, get across.
Yeah, I would love to see it happen in this season.
I don't want to spoil the book, so I'm not going to say where it ended in Dance of Dragons, but it's safe to say that she is not ruling the 7 kingdoms. So
you're not going to have to spoil the book much longer because we don't know anything. Books like this is the last season. Well, I wouldn't be surprised if this season they go beyond the books. Which I know they have in other places.
That's another thing. And what do you say, as somebody who's not a book reader, what do you say to the purists out there that are disappointed with the deviations that have already taken place last year and you maybe can go back to the 3rd season and maybe becoming more prevalent this go around?
Right. I don't know what the deviations are because I don't read the books, but I like
I've heard people say, that they're kind of pissed off that, so-and-so's doing this. Oh, my gosh, that didn't happen in Feast of Crows or Dance of Dragons. So what do you say to those people, being a TV guy that watches a lot of shows? Yeah,
I mean, they can't have, for the people who love the books, like Elio and Linda from Westeros.org.com.
And we love them, by the way.
We love them. I mean, they're fantastic, and they analyze the book from the TV show. But the reality is, I mean, you can't have a book in a television show. With a television show, you only have 1 hour to tell a story. In a book, you can, fill as many pages as you want and talk about every little detail. And that's just not the reality in a television show. That's why books get combined and characters get combined. I mean, people who are upset about if you're genuinely upset about how the show is because they've cut things from the book,
right?
I don't, that's just the way things are. Welcome to television. I mean, has there been any book in history that they've adapted? Look at Lord of the Rings. I mean, I know I forget all the characters in Lord of the Rings, but I know there's one specific character in Lord of the Rings that they omitted from the movies, and he was a big character, but they just had to because obviously you can't have everything in these massive novels that goes into a television show or a movie. In a television show you have more time than a movie, and they had a movie, and now they have a television show with Game of Thrones, and there's just not enough time. I think
I know that it bumps the crap out of you as it does me. When we watch The Sopranos all the time, those episodes would say they were an hour long, and they would be only 48, 51 minutes, and it's like, oh, we're gypped off by 9 minutes, and say, we would text each other, oh, the intro's running, it's 9:07 here, and it's no ends at 10 o'clock. Do you think that's? I mean, why do you think that occurs mostly? Do you think it's something in editing where they, in post-production where they're like, okay, obviously they film a lot of things that get cut from the show, and that's any show, that's any movie.
Right. I mean, I'm upset on one hand because this is cable. This is premium cable.
Right.
They don't have commercials. They don't have sponsorships. They can run, like there are shows on FX that run an AMC that literally run an hour and 12 minutes. So the show starts at 9. It doesn't end until 10, 11. 10, 12, like that 10, 12 p.m., not 11 o'clock. But there are shows on those channels. That's not even premium cable. I mean, and those ones have commercials. And then you have a show like on HBO, which runs at 45 minutes. Now, I realize that as a creator, you might say, you know what, we could run an extra 10 minutes, but I don't want to just jam this episode with a bunch of stories that don't need to be told. I'd rather have a lean and mean story. And I get that. I understand that. But at the same time, if you do have all this story to tell, you do have all these books, you do have all this material, I'm not exactly sure where the problem is. So that does kind of upset me that the shows run a little short. I mean, the producers and these Wikipedia sites say, oh, the average episode is 54 minutes, but that's just not true. That's with the titles sequence, which runs 2 minutes. That's with the previously on. That's with the outro credits. I mean, that eats up like 10 minutes of time.
Is that an HBO thing? Because we've seen that carry over from multiple series.
I mean, HBO, okay, Game of Thrones is, in terms of big shows, you can't get bigger than Game of Thrones. It's the biggest show out there. I have to imagine that if these producers went to, Plepler, who runs HBO, and said, hey, we need each episode to be an hour and 10 minutes, I'm sure he would say, absolutely, go for it. I can't imagine him saying, no, I'm sorry, we need Silicon Valley comes on. I just can't imagine that's the conversation.
Right. And for people that don't understand, I mean, the HBO, it seems that what we read in the press throws money at this show like no other, because obviously they're seeing the
right, rightfully so,
on the investment. Sure, it's probably. I mean, I would love to see the correlation of, Game of Thrones, being on air, and obviously going from season 1, season 2, season 3 to the amount of new subscribers to HBO. And HBO, what do they put out, like an HBO Now or somewhere you don't even need to have like Comcast or Verizon or something like that?
Yeah, that's a big issue because they put it out specifically in time for Game of Thrones, and still the pirates are taking and basically stealing Game of Thrones and watching it and kind of circumventing HBO. Now, I'm sure HBO Now is doing well, but I know there's a lot of issue with it. Just a news article came out, I think, a week ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, that there was a bar or a restaurant or somewhere that was just showing HBO to the public, and HBO basically went to them and shut it down and said, you can't show this to the public anymore.
It's like a fight, but a lot of people do that. They'll do that this weekend for Mayweather-Pacquiao, pay $10, $15, $20 to go to a jam-packed bar, which is, I think, the worst way to watch a boxing match.
That's on Showtime, though, isn't it? That's not HBO.
Correct. But, Josh, there were many pay-per-views on HBO and still are as well, and all bars and restaurants do that too. So it's kind of, it's the same thing, even though one's sports and one's, TV series, all that jazz. But my thing is, about HBO being everywhere, and I just think with technology, I just wish that a show like The Sopranos, Entourage, I wish back in the day, obviously now they're on demand, you can watch them anytime, but wouldn't have been nice back in 99, 2000, 2001. Those shows were available on demand or you know, on your tablet, smartphone, all that stuff on the HBO Go app. I mean, it's crazy to think about now because we sit here in 2015 and you got to think probably in less than, I don't know, 5 years, 10 years. I mean, it's all going to change even more, and technology is going to advance. You can argue, and this is kind of getting a little bit off topic here, but I'll leave it at this. You can argue that technology is changing more rapidly now than it did when Philo Farnsworth invented the television.
Okay? For sure. I mean, you could look at the dragons on.
Right, with the CGI stuff.
Yeah, the CGI. I mean, they do all special.
A lot of money too, correct?
It costs a ton of money.
Yeah,
just for the dragons, and they do a ton of CGI work, and it gets better every year on Game of Thrones. And I think the special they did this year, before I think it was the special, or maybe I saw it somewhere else, but this they said how basically every year with the dragons, not only does technology get better, but the dragons get bigger, and they have to do all these renderings for the dragons, and it takes much longer. And the technology on Game of Thrones. I'm not a technology guy, but that must be pretty cutting edge because those dragons are amazing. Just the detail, just all the details of the show are great. The dragons, actually, you know what? I kind of take that back because the animations last year I can't remember the name of the episode, but in the finale last year with the kind of walking skeletons were a bit underwhelming. I don't know if it was the technology or just maybe the presentation of it, but that was actually kind of underwhelming. But other than that, I would say the dragons are pretty awesome. And I wonder what they're going to do because every year it's been a tradition, not tradition, but almost like a stepping stone that each year the dragons get a little bit bigger on the show. Well, they're pretty much, I can't imagine they get any bigger. Maybe they will, I don't know. But, I mean, they're at that point now where they're at the max big they're going to get, I'm assuming. Mm-hmm. So at this point, they either go to Westeros or, again, we're just sitting in Essos spinning our wheels.
I wanted to ask you, when they shoot the scenes, you know, with the dragons, what do you think? Are they people with the dots on them, like an EA Sports, you know,
right. Well, they used to use
a game or something like that? Is that what the deal is there when they're actually shot live?
I know they used to use green balls
with on somebody's body,
right? Like, no, like just like almost like green styrofoam balls, and they put them on a stick, and they'd put them around Dany, and she'd basically be talking to these like styrofoam balls.
Oh wow!
Like on her shoulder, and I guess they would CGI them in. Now I don't know exactly what they do because they're not like these little dragons on her shoulder and just crawling around. Now they're these big things. I'm sure they use some sort of stick or some sort of object to get a green screen in. But I know they used to use these little green balls, but they're so big now they probably just use a full green screen and just do it all on there.
So we were talking about piracy a few minutes ago, and I wanted to bring up how the first 4 episodes got leaked online. And obviously HBO, and rightfully so, very irate, and a lot of fans saw the first 4 episodes. Right now, as it stands, Sunday's episode will be episode 4. So a lot of fans out there have seen them. Probably the majority hasn't. But Josh, how does that happen in a show of this magnitude?
Well, I think there's a lot of people pointing fingers at other people. We haven't really heard anything else from Game of Thrones or HBO. I'd assume, as I've heard some critics say, it's not critics who did it. It's probably like, you know, one of the people who HBO sent it out to. Because HBO send these episodes out to a ton of people, not just critics, just people with the network. And it somehow probably got leaked. You know, who knows? It could be a disgruntled person, or it could have been someone who just, hey, you know, my nephew wants to watch them, and give them to his nephew. The nephew loads them up online, sends them to a friend. So we don't know exactly how they got uploaded. I mean, I'm sure HBO knows more at this point. I mean, it sucks, you know, for HBO. I know a couple of years ago, the Homeland finale got leaked that day. I
remember you saying that, right?
Yeah, the Homeland finale got leaked the day of, and that was a big episode because a very important character died in that episode, so that was a big deal. But the reality is, you know, as technology advances, people are getting their movies and televisions in more ways. So, I mean, that's going to happen. If you put something on the internet, no matter how secure your servers are or who you send it to, it's probably going to get leaked somehow in some way.
The chance, of course.
Right. So
it's hard for me to fathom a show of that magnitude, and you could argue it's the most popular show currently on TV. And I always have that debate. Crazy to think about that the first 4 actually did go out online somewhere, and good for.
Whoa, David, are you hearing that?
No.
Okay, maybe it's just me.
Why? What did you hear?
I'm hearing like a commercial. Oh my goodness. Are you there?
I'm here. Are you here?
Yeah, I'm still here. Okay, it ended. Wow. Maybe I'm just going crazy. What were you saying?
A commercial on what?
It was like one of those commercials, like it interrupted. Well, I don't want to say it interrupted here. I just heard it. Maybe it was something I closed out of all my stuff. Maybe I'm just crazy. Anyway, back to Game of Thrones.
So I just feel, I thank God that most of those, all the piracy videos have been taken down and all that stuff. I think for the most part, well, I obviously don't want to advertise that they may be still out there, but
of course they're still out there.
Right.
Anything that's out there stays out there.
Right. But
it's not going away. It's not like this isn't 2005 where you take something down from there. Once it's up on the internet, it's up on the internet. It's there forever. It's not coming down. I wouldn't be surprised. I don't think it will happen because the reason it was the first 4 is because the first 4 is the screeners that were sent out to critics and other people. So I can't imagine like the finale being leaked or something because obviously that wasn't sent out to a critic or in a batch of episodes, but anything's possible. But I mean, that's the reason why. And honestly, I feel like, HBO should look on the bright side and that it's the first 4 episodes of the season and not the last 4 episodes of the season where things really get exciting. Because the truth is the first 4 episodes aren't the most wow. Like certain things happen in them, I guess, aren't in the book, so people are surprised. But at the same time, they're not the episodes that HBO really wants Twitter to blow up on.
Now, for those that actually do watch the series currently and have watched the first 3 episodes, one criticism could be that it's moving too slow and it's kind of underwhelming. And now we're in season 5, and the first few episodes haven't been as exciting as maybe some people would have wanted. Are you okay with a series that kind of backloads or puts things, towards the 7, 8, 9, and 10th episode of the series versus in the beginning? Or do you like, of course, every show's going to have 1 or 2 action-packed scenes. You're going to go, oh my gosh, that happened. But for the most part, and I'll speak for myself, I think the first 3 episodes, as much as I love the show, have been a little underwhelming for me.
Yeah, no, I don't like it. They backloaded. This isn't the first time, It's been this tradition that episode 9 is their big episode, and it's almost become. And obviously, episode 9 should be a big episode because it's the episode leading into the finale. But at the same time, it's almost become predictable in a bad way, where it's like, oh well, something big is going to happen in episode 9. Not that I don't want something big to happen in episode 9, but it's like the only big thing is going to happen in episode 9.
Right.
Now, last season, I could argue that point argue against the point because I would say, well, the Mountain and the Viper, that was an awesome episode and ended in a really cool way. So that was different, but still, they've almost made it a tradition, like, oh, just wait for episode 9 because that's the big thing. But also, it kind of takes away because then episode 10 always becomes less of an explosive episode, more of a, well, here's a preview for the next season. And that's just kind of disappointing. Right. Game of Thrones has done a good job where they put some great stuff. I love it when they have an episode like And Now His Watch Has Ended, where Dany at the end, the episode was okay, but then at the end, Dany with Dracarys and dragons burn the whole city. That's what I want to see more of.
Episode 4.
That's what I want to see more of. I want to see more episodes that make me say, wow, at the end of every episode and make me go crazy for the next episode. And shows have done that all the time. Lost. I mean, literally every episode of Lost, I would be dying that whole week until I got to the next episode. Now, that was a bit of a different show. Every episode is a cliffhanger. But Game of Thrones, I mean, when you're making that much money, when you have material to work with, they need to be building the stuff already. And more than that, if stories move, they die. And Dany's story, to me, is just dead at this point. It's going to be a big deal. She's going to take out her dragons, and everyone's going to go, oh, my God, and they'll burn things. I mean, it's predictable at this point, you know. I know that's going to happen. You know that's going to happen.
It's very stationary right now.
Right, but what I'm saying is that's a predictable storyline. Do you disagree? I mean, at one point, she's going to take out her dragons. They're going to go crazy and burn things, and everyone will be like, oh, my God. And that's something producers want. I want a twist. I want to see where it's like the slaves come in and kill the two dragons. Because who would see that coming? I mean, yeah, it would kill the show because you want to see the dragons, but how big of a twist would that be? Wouldn't you go, oh, my God, I cannot believe they had these two dragons locked up. I thought they were going to release, and they just got killed.
Yeah, that would be huge. And
that would be shocking.
I don't think anybody would expect that, obviously.
That's my point. They wouldn't expect it. And it's become predictable. The show is becoming predictable. And while I love the show, predictability is the death of good television. And that's what Game of Thrones is becoming in some ways, because we know Dany's going to go to Westeros.
Do you think these producers, and you watching the series and them talking about how much they're going to deviate from the book, have the cojones to pull off a stunt, maybe not of that magnitude, but something resembling that nature?
I don't think they'll kill the dragons off. Although, even though I want to see the dragons in action, obviously, to have them killed to me would be so much more crazy because everyone would go crazy because no one's expecting that. But I think the showrunners, I guess they know what's coming. They know what George is going to do in his books. So I think that if they do deviate, the deviations aren't going to be so great, whereas it actually changes the ending of the book. So let's say, for instance, I'll give you an example. Let's say, for instance, at the end of George's book, his novel series, which who knows what's going to end, when it's going to end, that Tyrion is on the Iron Throne. Let's just say that's what his ending is. I don't think you're going to see them in the show kill him off now and then have the ending change so differently. I think they know. Like, for instance, I can't even remember his name. Who was Bran's Jojen? Like, Jojen died at the end of last season. So my guess is that his story in the books doesn't go much further. And that's what I'm trying to say is if their story in the books don't go much further, they don't play a big role in the books to come, then I think they might as well just kill them off in the show because they need to clear the space anyway for new characters to come in.
Right.
So that's kind of my take. Yeah. I don't think they're going to do anything too crazy. I think that it might seem crazy to us because, you know, for someone like you who've read the book, you might say, oh, my God, this person died. They're not dead in the book. Yeah, but they might die in the beginning of the next book when it comes out. So to you, it might be crazy, but to them, it might not be as crazy because they know what's to come, and they know that this character is pretty much doesn't have a story already. They're going to die in another way, so why not just kill them now and shock the audience?
I would love to see them, even though I read the books, take a totally different stab at the future of this series. I think it would make it more thrilling. Just for me personally, I don't want it to go stride for stride with the books. And obviously, we all know this. The show is going to surpass the books because it takes George a long time to write, and I'm not. It's not a knock on him. I know you can knock him for that.
No, I'm not. I don't knock him for writing. Look, he took his time writing it.
These books are close to 1,200, 1,300 pages. I mean, that's a long time. And he doesn't write. The things aren't written. Didn't you say one time to me that you were? He's probably going to be in his rocking chair or on his deathbed by the time this.
Look, I'm not knocking him for taking a long time to write the books. That's not what I'm saying. He can take as long as he wants to write the books. He's dispelled the rumor, and he actually calls this like the worst thing possible. Like he thinks people who say it are ridiculous. So you can count me in that group. That he has no ending for the story. That he's basically just kind of delaying it as long as possible. That way he can kind of, he's an old guy. If he passes away. Everyone's saying, "Oh my God, he didn't finish the books." Like, what was his end going to be like? Now, supposedly he's told Dan and David what the ending is going to be in the shows. Obviously, the television shows can have an ending. His editor supposedly knows. So I'm sure he has some sort of ending. Right. But at the same time, I think he's feeling the pressure now. Like, I'm sure during season 1 and 2 and 3, maybe he didn't feel as much pressure. And he said that in articles you can read. He didn't feel the pressure, but now he's starting to feel the pressure. He's starting to feel like, oh my goodness, I actually have to finish these books, and people have these expectations. And there's a lot of shows out there, David, like, even though I love them, like Lost, Dexter, a lot of other shows that were these big shows at one point, and they just had these disastrous endings. And as a result, the shows got trashed. Lost, which is a beloved show, got so much crap for its ending. The Sopranos, I love it, you love it, but for some reason, people don't. When people think of The Sopranos, it's crazy to me, because when people think of Sopranos, they don't think of The Sopranos as the show. They think of Holston's, which is literally 3 minutes of the entire television show. They think of the last 3 minutes of the show, which is amazing to me, because like Holston, it's just not what the show.
TV works is what have you done for me lately, and I guess business works the same way as well.
You're only as good as your last envelope, David.
Well, if I were on The Sopranos, I probably envelope would have been packing. Let's put it that way.
Well, I've read
a few. Come back.
I've listened to a few things that people have said. I forget who said it. But characters on the show, actors on the show, have said that Game of Thrones, like Dan and David, and I believe a lot of the actors watch The Sopranos, and they respect The Sopranos, and obviously, but they kind of use The Sopranos as a model for what kind of show Game of Thrones is going to be, rightfully so. And that makes me think of a good in a positive light, but it also has me a little worried, because they need to live up to those standards, and are they going to be able to live up to those standards? Is George? I don't know. I think he's feeling the pressure, rightfully so. He's created these great books. This great series. A lot of people I know have panned the last 2 books. They haven't loved them as much as the third one, which season 3 and 4 were great of the television show.
Right.
But we'll have to see. I hope that they can end it in a good way. But at this point, for me, they're in their last leg. The show's been renewed for season 6 already, so that's good. My guess is they're gonna. I mean, it's pretty much it has to be renewed for season 7 unless they pull a luck and people die. 15 people die on set or something.
Let's not talk about that, because I would love if that show was still on.
No, they don't even have it on HBO Go. It's a shame. What a shame. But Game of Thrones.
That?
I don't know. They don't have Luck. They don't have John from Cincinnati. Well, I think there's a few more shows.
That one would ruin people's days if they spend.
I've actually been interested in rewatching John from Cincinnati just because. I don't know. But anyway, back to Game of Thrones.
Well, okay, so
yes.
we touched on how Dany's storyline might be stagnant, and Tyrion's is exciting. Bran's not in it. One storyline that I think pulls people in, and I think one of the most beloved characters on the show, is Arya Stark. And currently, right now, she is in Bravos at the House of White and Black and White, same.
Black and White.
Okay, Black and White. I think that it's a storyline that has a lot of people wanting more and more and more of her, and characters coming back. Jaqen H'ghar, who does not come back in the books, comes in on the show as a fan favorite, which I think.
Oh, he doesn't come back in the. That's crazy. So what happens? Well, actually, I don't want you to tell me what happens, but that's crazy. He doesn't come back in the books.
If my comprehension serves me correct, I haven't read the books in a while.
Oh, wow. In the books, does she go to the House of Black and White?
Yes.
So she's still in the house.
But I don't believe he's not there. I think he's done.
So who teaches her? I mean, we're not that far in the show, but who teaches her in the books?
The higher ups, for lack of a better term, at the House of the Black and White.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, I like it that he came back. I thought that was great.
But
that's my favorite moment of the show thus far.
Right, and that's the producers, I think, listening to their fan base and saying, you know what, here's where, Dave introducing another character and bring this guy back. People know him, people love him, kind of had a little mysterious, spooky edge to him, and people were kind of on the edge of the seat when his music came along, and I think that's nice, because I think a lot of shows would have been like, been there, done that, and kind of just move on. It's nice to kind of wrap it up, and it makes sense for that particular storyline. There's some continuity there, obviously, with her going down that path to Bravos. And I like the fact that, in the one particular scene, that she keeps the sword that Ned gave her, Needle,
John gave her needle.
John gave her needle. Ned, what? Okay, in back in Westeros. So I think that's right. John gave her needle before he went to the wall.
The wall, yes.
But he gave her that sword at Winterfell.
Yes.
Right, thank you. So I think that's cool. That kind of symbolic that, and I think that the producers said this after the show, kind of in their a couple of minutes of kind of snippet, kind of inside the series segment. I think she's still obviously she's trying to become no one and have no identity, but keeping the sword obviously a motif, a symbol that she deep down is still a Stark. And I think a lot of people kind of smiled at that moment, and there might be more to come for her in some retaliation, just like Sansa Stark. So,
well, wait, let me interrupt before you ask something. So, going back to Jack and Hagar, I agree with you, but we don't necessarily know that because, again, going back to this whole idea that the producers know things we don't. I mean, what if in the books he does come back at one point, and George told them, "Oh, he's going to come back at this point," and the producers just said, "Well, why don't we just bring him back at this point because he's already coming back? So we'll just bring him back now because we need the surprise now because we have nothing going on." And that way, the story will eventually kind of, course correct itself eventually. But this way, it gives her Arya more to do. And I do. So that's just one. I mean, maybe that doesn't happen. It's just me throwing out an idea. But again, it's an idea that the books in the show might deviate and might have differences, but in the end, things are going to course correct themselves. Just like time travel, you could change something in the past, but eventually it will course correct itself. That's just the way the universe works. But with Arya, Jack and Hagar, you basically says to her, you need to be a faceless man. You're not Arya Stark. You need to throw that away. And yes, she wants to be a faceless man, but so much of her character is she is Arya Stark. So even though she wants, I don't necessarily know if she wants to be a faceless man. She wants the revenge, and she wants to get her family back together, and she wants to be Arya Stark. Being a faceless man is just kind of the path that'll get her there, but it's not necessarily, I think, where she wants to end up. That's just me.
I agree with that. I think that the end game for her is obviously to go back home and to get some revenge and kill some people that kind of did her family wrong. And that leads me, and that's a great segue, over to Sansa Stark. And by the way, this portion of the program is brought to you by UCF's own Huey Magoo's, who just opened after a fire. How long ago was that fire?
Long time ago. Well over a year ago.
The best chicken fingers, grilled or fried, and I would go with the grilled, in Central Florida. Head to Huey Magoo's.
Love those chicken fingers.
UCF campus. I know Josh will be headed over there and grabbing some
Absolutely.
with his buddies.
Absolutely.
So after we get the business item out of the way, on to Sansa, and obviously it's a change from the books to the show. Sansa does not go in the show to Winterfell to marry Ramsay Bolton, Ramsay Snow.
Okay.
Are you okay with the producers adapting that storyline to have her go to the Boltons and maybe get some revenge there? We have to wait and see what this.
Right. Well, I don't know exactly what happens in the book with Sansa Stark. So, am I okay with it? Sure. I don't care either way. But I am okay, and I'm glad that this season, the one thing I am happy about this season, I shouldn't say one thing, many things I'm happy about this season, but one of the things I'm happy about with the season is the people who are coming together. Sansa and, Littlefinger were kind of together the whole time, but now Sansa's been in King's Landing this whole time.
Right.
So this is really the first time we've had an opportunity for her to go elsewhere, and I'm glad that she's meeting up with the Boltons. So we'll get a new dynamic there, similar with Tyrion. Obviously,
they killed her family,
He did kill her family, and that's going to be a great, hopefully a great story. And then you have Tyrion with Jorah now, who just kidnapped Tyrion. So I'm assuming he's going to do something with her, maybe take her to Danny or sell him as a slave. Who knows? Maybe take him back to his sister. I don't know. But so we're getting different interactions, and I'm glad that's happening. So, like I said, I don't read the book, so does it matter to me that Sansa doesn't do this in the book? I mean, I don't care. Whatever happens. Let's put it this way. If the book got not panned, the book didn't necessarily get panned. If the book didn't get the best reviews, then I'm glad that they're deviating and giving Sansa a new dynamic more than just her and Joffrey or her and Cersei or her and Littlefinger. I'm glad now she's going to be with the people who killed her family. So that should be interesting. I'm hopeful, and it looks like Sansa. The thing about Sansa is a lot of people focus on Arya as the Stark who really is the interesting one, but Sansa's right. She's been in King's Landing. She's been literally in the lion's den, and she's come out alive, whereas a lot of people haven't. So I think Sansa has come out a lot stronger, a lot smarter, and I think she's going to be able to outplay and outlast the Boltons and maybe even Littlefinger and some other people. So I think Sansa has, even though Arya's gone through plenty of her own trials, I think Sansa has been through hell and come out the other side. And I think now we get to see what happens when you get a Sansa who's basically battle-tested.
And stride for stride with her, obviously, is Littlefinger making all these arrangements and a pretty deceptive, secretive guy in his own right. And my big thing is just seeing his storyline blossom even more, because it really already has. And I'm wondering if he goes back, to the capital in the show and to King's Landing and, creates a buzz there, and Cersei gets on him. Obviously, I know a few things that happen in King's Landing. I don't want to go into too much detail on some characters that might be taking a hit, but I'm curious if they're going to have in the show, if they're going to have Littlefinger keep going south rather than going back to the Vale.
I'm actually kind of worried about that because,
to go into the lion's den, as you said. I want to see that because I think it makes great television.
Well, Littlefinger's been in pretty much the whole time. His story's been in King's Landing. So, I know he said at the end of this episode that he's going back to King's Landing. He dropped Sansa off at Winterfell, and he's going back to King's Landing to deal with Cersei. But we've seen him in King's Landing. We've seen him deal with Cersei. So, I kind of hope he goes elsewhere. I kind of hope he goes elsewhere because the truth of the matter is his story's kind of played out there. What more can he do in King's Landing? I don't think much. So I hope he goes elsewhere because him in King's Landing is kind of boring. Pretty much the only person left in King's Landing is Cersei, right? And Marjorie and Tommen, but I don't know how big those characters are. So really, if Cersei is the only main character in King's Landing, I don't really know if. I almost wanted Littlefinger to stay in Winterfell because I feel like that would be more interesting than him going back to King's Landing. I feel like King's Landing at this point has been so played out. I feel like we spent the past 4 seasons, the vast majority of time has been at King's Landing, and not that it's not interesting there. It's very interesting there, but again,
you mentioned
should have just played out with that story.
Well, you mentioned that you don't like that story, but they have introduced a new area in the South on the show, and you saw Prince Doran Martell, you saw the Sand Snakes, and you right off the bat told me you weren't a big fan. Tell the folks out there why.
I think when they introduced Oberyn last year was really cool because you get to see him as kind of a badass character. He comes in, he's already in the whorehouse before we even meet him. He runs his hand over the fire, which is just a cool thing to do. And obviously his brother Durin is supposed to be a much different character, but I feel like they didn't do a great job of introducing them and making them really stand out as people I want to follow. As soon as I saw Oberyn last year, I knew he was someone interesting that I wanted to follow on the show. This year, honestly, I know Jaime's heading to the door with Bronn, but honestly, I don't really. If we didn't see them again, I wouldn't care. They're not a character that I really have any interest in following. So that's just kind of upsetting. I think they could have spent a little bit more time there. It just seemed like a really quick scene, and I know they brought Oberyn's Paramore back, but again, she wasn't an interesting character last year. I don't really think they developed her to be
criticisms of the show, and you know this just as well as anybody out there. There's not enough time to fully document all of these characters because you only have a hour-long episode, which in turn
there is enough time. If they want there to be, there is enough time because
then the show's going to be 15 minutes long and you'll go crazy.
If you clock the show for when it actually begins, when the first scene begins to when the last scene ends, the show is somewhere in the 40-minute range. I mean, The Good Wife on CBS is in the 40-minute range. Good Wife probably runs longer than some episodes of Game of Thrones, which is insane because Game of Thrones...
With network TV, just to tell everybody out there, I believe, and Josh, please jump in if I'm incorrect, a half-an-hour show, I believe, is 22 minutes with 8 minutes commercial, and an hour-long show is, 44 minutes, 46?
Yeah, something like that. I mean, it all depends on the commercials and whatever things that are going on. And obviously, there's a lot of, remember, if a show's running short, they can always say, oh, we'll just throw a longer previously on, tack it on to the episode.
It does count. Isn't it the same with the movies, too? I mean, is total, when they say runtime of a movie, does that include, the opening, closest to the whole productions or all that?
I think we're talking about apples and oranges here because we're talking about network TV, CBS, Fox, NBC, ABC, whatever, versus HBO. And the reality is, on the network TVs, the people in charge of the network say, listen, you have 24 minutes to fill, however many minutes to fill, and you have to fill them with previously ons or whatever, and we'll fill it with commercials and etc.
Right.
HBO, I don't know how HBO works or any of these internal mechanisms work, but I have to imagine that, especially with Game of Thrones, they have a lot more leeway. And again, I have to imagine I don't want to say set the terms, but they get what they want, I have to imagine.
Sure.
So I have to imagine that if they wanted to, they could take more time. I know you don't watch FX as much as I do, but there's a ton of shows on FX and AMC that clearly run over their mark time. Sons of Anarchy, I don't watch it too much, but literally a show that was supposed to be an hour would run for, not joking, almost 2 hours when they said it was supposed to be an hour. So, and that's with FX. This is premium cable we're talking about with HBO. So if they wanted the time, they could take the time and do it. This is not a show that is just thrown together. This is a show that there's a lot of money, there's a lot of people on it. Again, if they said they wanted to do 20 episodes a season, I wouldn't be surprised if HBO said, absolutely, take our money, do it.
And you would, again, go crazy and probably throw a fit. And
I never throw a fit. I'm just putting the fact. I'm laying things out. Okay, this is Big Brother. You want to be the person who's closed in and just kind of sees one perspective, and I'm the person who has to lay it out all on the table and say, look, I love this show, but it needs to. And I think it is. I don't think the producers are stupid. They've said before they're going to bring it to an ending. I trust it to an ending. But we can already see that, again, Dany's story is becoming stagnant. I think there are some stories that have become stagnant. Obviously, I think they're changing. And we're only in episode 3 this year, coming up on episode 4. But the show needs to move. And it's been stuck.
How could 7 to 10 minutes an episode? Yeah, of course, over 5 seasons, sure, that adds up to being a lot of time. But
could add up to a whole new episode.
Yeah, but correct. But can a show go into so much detail after, as you know, like episode 1, the premieres of each season?
Right. The first thing I said,
they're all catch me ups.
The first thing I said, if you remember, the first thing I said at the beginning of the podcast was that, if I don't think it is a good idea for, creatively, for shows to just jam as much in as possible. It's if they said, we're going to do each episode in clearly an hour and we'll just throw in filler. Nobody wants filler. We just want pure action. I get that. And I don't want them to just throw in random filler, even if, that's what the pure book readers want, just the random filler, which is what gets cut out, that filler that nobody wants to watch. But when you're going back to the Dorne thing, when they're introducing this character, I felt like they could have taken a little bit. If they're, I don't know how big of a character these people are going to be. So maybe they're not going to be a big character. You don't need to spend time with them.
Sure.
But I'm assuming because you have Jaime and Bronn going down there,
right.
I'm assuming because they did take the time to show us these people that they're going to be somewhat big characters this season, maybe in future seasons. I don't know, but if you're going to do that, then I think you should take the time to introduce us to more of them. I forget, Ilaria Sand, who was a character last year, but pretty boring, I thought. Doran, who, again, is a character, but he doesn't, nothing he did really makes me want to watch more of him. And then some guard who was holding a sword or something, who didn't say a word. I mean, it's a very boring way to introduce someone.
What did you
grab me?
We introduced you off the top as the High Sparrow.
Yes.
And what do you think about their role? Because I find that, especially, you're going after the High Septon and the brothel. I found that to be very exhilarating, and I thought that was a cool scene. That here you have this probably the most religious guy, or kind of can be. I think the creator said can kind of be equated to like the Pope. Now, and he's getting, thrown into the dungeons underneath the Red Keep. And that's a story that I think could play a huge role later on in this season. I, again, don't want to spoil anything that happens in the book, but I know that they will become a part in a larger capacity later on. But I think that bringing Lancel back, who looks totally different, by the way, with the shaved head and talking deeper, doesn't screech his voice, I think that's good for the series. I think that provides some excitement.
I agree. Look, I'm a Sparrow now, but I agree. I'm excited to see what they do with that, because, like I said before, King's Land has kind of been stagnant for the past 4 seasons, pretty much. Right. So it's kind of exciting that they introduced this, because now you don't have any Tywin running the city. You have Tommen, who's running the city, but it's really Cersei, and they're kind of throwing this new element in. So I'm really excited to see what they do with it. The King's Landing, if they want to continue showing King's Landing, which they definitely do and will, they need to shake things up. So this High Sparrow, I think it's great. Hopefully it'll shake things up, and it'll.
What's the actor's name that plays the
Jonathan Pryce. I mean, he's a famous actor. He's
he
was in Evita. He played Juan Perón. He was the bad guy in Tomorrow Never Dies, the James Bond film with Pierce Brosnan. So he's a big actor. I would say he's one of the biggest actors on the show. Just
Is
name
he a U.S. born guy, or was he born over?
No, I think he's British. They're all British on the show, but I think he's British, or from Europe. I'm not exactly sure where, but
and I know a lot of people would have to read articles to kind of find out some things about the background of a lot of these characters. Obviously, the big ones,
even the actors.
Mark Addy, is that his name?
Mark Addy.
But aside from them, those are huge actors people would know. But the smaller actors like an Arya, Sansa, Bran,
they'd never acted before. I believe this is their first acting job.
That's what I'm getting at. A lot of them came from theater. I know Catelyn Stark or Catelyn Tully. I know she was a big theater person as well, and a lot of Charles Dance probably has done theater too, even though he was, he was recently in
Imitation Game.
The Imitation Game that I saw, which I thought he was very good. I think he's in something else that's coming out too.
He was also in Dracula.
You know who was? I meant to say this to you before when we were talking about Dany. Missandei's like a big character in. She's this character called Ramsay in Fast and the Furious 7.
Really? I haven't seen it yet. She's in Fast and Furious 7. That's kind of cool.
Her name is like Natalie Emmanuel. I think that's her name.
Wait, have you seen Fast and Furious 7? Is that what you're telling me, or you just saw it?
I did see it.
How was it?
I saw it in Connecticut. I thought it was really good. And a great tribute at the end of Paul Walker. Very sad.
It's one of I think it's the third highest grossing movie of all time now, but behind Avatar and Titanic.
Wait, Fast and Furious 7?
Already.
Wow.
That's what I've heard. Let's put it this way. Grossed over $1 billion already. And
it's well done. Jason Statham's in it. He plays kind of the villain.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, people know him from the Transporters.
He's a High Sparrow as well.
No,
Statham.
Well, yes, he is with the hair, with the lack thereof.
Yeah.
I think that it was. Listen, you know what you're getting into when you go into that movie. You know me, I like movies that are fast paced, moving, and keep me, engaged, and that's one of them. Is it going to win an Academy Award tomorrow? Obviously not.
No, I don't think it will. That's not.
They don't make that type of movie for that. But every time I hear Vin Diesel's voice, because I hear like he's such like kind of like a soft spoken guy, in person.
Think of I Am Groot.
Well, I think of that the ADR people in post production just are, jacking up his volume or are kind of,
he was Groot in Guardians of the Galaxy, Vin Diesel.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, he was Groot.
You probably
didn't recognize the voice?
Probably told me that. What, doesn't that guy only say Groot or whatever?
I am Groot. Yes, that's what he says.
Like Hodor.
Yeah, exactly like Hodor. Who, it's a shame he's not in this season.
He's not in this season.
Okay, so I'm looking online. As of now, it said, this is Wikipedia, so who knows if it's true.
Great source.
Great sourcing. As of now, it says it is the 5th highest grossing movie behind Avatar, Titanic, The Avengers, and Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2. But it's still making money. It's still out there. And it's not really that far behind these other ones. So I don't think it'll catch Titanic and Avatar, but it'll be the 3rd highest, which is crazy.
Will Game of Thrones go down as after it ends in 10, 15 years from now? Do you think it will go down as one of the best series of all time?
Like Marjorie, I'm sure Game of Thrones will go down in some way. Say it again?
To people that can remember the most recent series, on TV,
Game of Thrones is when people look back at, I think when people look back at 2000 to 2010, people put Sopranos as like one of the big shows of the time. I think when people look back at 2010 to 2020, so when 2020 comes along and they say, what were the best 10 shows of the decade? What were the most important 10 shows of the decade? I think Game of Thrones will be on that list.
And on that note, what's one thing that you feel that future shows that maybe aren't on network TV, but mostly on the paid-for service, can learn from a show like Thrones, even though they could be in a totally different genre? Is it the fact that ensemble casts work like Oz did, even though Oz was more, obviously constricted in the prison, and you had all these characters interacting with one another, whereas in Thrones, they're everywhere.
Well, I think, I think Game of Thrones is so fantastical that so many shows have tried to reproduce it. And like, if you look over the past year or 2 years, a lot of networks have come out, with, they're going to try to do the new fantasy series. Fox tried to come out with this show called Hieroglyph, which they canceled before it even came out, but they said it's going to be the Game of Thrones of Egypt. There's a show on Netflix that came out very recently called Marco Polo, which, they tried to portray it as we're going to be the, this fantasy series in the time of Marco Polo. So a lot of television shows and networks have tried to reproduce the grandeur that's Game of Thrones, and they're just not even close. But I think the one thing that networks and ambitious writers are going to walk away from with this is that they're going to try to be ambitious with their television making, because when Game of Thrones is over, and even when it's not over, everyone's going to be asking, what's the next Game of Thrones? What's the next big show that's going to take place over different continents and be this big fantasy series? Now, I think people are turned off by fantasy, and that's why Game of Thrones works, is because it's not really about fantasy. The fantasy, the dragons, the magic, that's kind of in the background. And I think a lot of successful shows, what they do is they take these genres that people don't like, or not necessarily don't like, but are very niche genres. Like Lost is a good example, which is very much a sci-fi show, but they masked it in this, island adventure show. And it just blew up because even though it's very much sci-fi in some ways, it's not because it's mass. And Game of Thrones is the same thing. It kind of takes these fantasy elements and puts them in this big drama, and it becomes something else. So I think that's what hopefully people have to realize. If they want to make a fantasy series, they need to, I don't want to say mask it, but they need to realize that the fantasy isn't what you need to embrace. You need to embrace the character elements. You know, Tyrion is a great character. We love Tyrion. I love Tyrion. You know, Arya is a great character. Ned was a great character. These people are great characters. That's why we follow them. You know, it's not the fantasy elements like, it's the character elements people like. So that's what hopefully they can take away with it. I mean, like I said, it's unfortunate because a lot of networks and shows have tried to bank on the get on the Game of Thrones bandwagon. So far, they haven't been able to. And, you know, a lot of that, I think, has to do with HBO because HBO, I mean, again, I'm not necessarily in these circles, but from what I've been hearing from all the different articles I read and such is HBO is the network you want to be at. A lot of these other networks restrict people. They don't give them the money. They don't give them the resources. They don't give them the talent. HBO, it seems like, gave Game of Thrones a really good deal, and that's why it's been able to succeed because HBO has really done, you know, a good job of planting the seeds and watering them and embracing the show. And I don't think other networks are going to be able to make it happen until they start saying, you know what, we're going to take a risk on this big show. And when they do that, then maybe we'll have another Game of Thrones-like show that's going to be big. But we'll see. I don't know. I'm not positive on what other shows are going to be able to emulate Game of Thrones as, but you know, hopefully Game of Thrones at least put the idea out there that it's possible to do this huge show and people will tune in.
All right, close it off at this: predictions for future episodes
of Game of Thrones.
Of Game of Thrones this season.
Predictions are what I'd like to see because they're very different.
I think that's a fair point. What would you like to see?
I would like. The God.
I'll start off saying I want to see more of the Arya storyline. I would like to see Tyrion end up meeting Daenerys this season versus next season, and it's just a build up until then. So one guy that we haven't talked about at all is Jorah, and at the end of episode 3, Jorah captures Tyrion and takes him away and says, I'm taking you to see the queen, or I'm taking you to the queen. So I love to see that. There's some other things that, of course, that I would love to see. You know, I love to see Sansa get revenge on the Boltons for what they did, and hopefully she ends up either doing something bad there, or Ramsay Snow is kind of, put out of his misery. Because the one shot, they had a shot of, I believe, the maids of the Boltons, whatever, and obviously they looked concerned for Sansa's sake when Sansa showed up. There was like one shot in episode 3 when Sansa gets introduced to Ramsay at Winterfell, and the camera pans over to like the girls. I think Ramsay had relations with one of them or whatever, or it could have been the girls that were with Reek at one point last season, and I think they were worried for Sansa's sake there. So I hope that she gets some revenge. But my number one, and this is going to surprise a lot of people, but I'd put Arya 1 and Tyrion Varys kind of 2.
Okay. My number 1 is something you said earlier, which I didn't even consider happening, but now that I think about it, like, it's the only thing to me that would honestly satisfy me. And I want Dany to go over to Westeros already, because she's been in Essos for so long. It's been spinning her wheels, and honestly, I need that to happen. I need that story to move forward. Like, even if that's what their plans are for season 6, I need them to take that next step towards. At the end of the season, she has her boats, and she's like, "I am marching on Westeros now."
Right. And that would be easier for the show's sake.
What?
Be easier for the show's sake, having all the characters together. It'd be great. You don't have to keep going from one area for 10 minutes and then go to the other for the second 10 minutes. It's kind of.
That's what I want season 5 to end on. I want the ending scene of season 5 to be Dany. You think she's staying in Essos, and Salmi and all the all the other people of hers walk in, and she goes, you know what? I'm sick of sitting here. I have a boat. I have my dragons. I'm going to Westeros right now. And we see her and an army of people just sailing across the narrow sea, and you see King's Landing in the distance, cut to black. That's the end of season 5. Like, that's what I want to see, because I'm sick and tired of them just sitting there. They need to move. Something needs to happen. So that's my number one, is Dany going to Westeros, because if she stays in Marine any longer, I feel like that is a waste of a story. I feel like she should have been over there in season 4 and in season 5 already, and she probably won't be over there until at least season 6. So that's a story that needs to move forward for me. I like Arya. I'm excited to see more of her. But honestly, she's kind of pretty isolated at the moment, because whereas other characters are converging, it seems like she's diverged. I realize she's on her own path and she's at the House of Black and White, but she can't stay at this house for the rest of the season. Like, she's at this house in Braavos. What's she going to do? You know, there's 7 episodes left. I mean, if by the end of the season she is still in Braavos with Jack and Gar sweeping the floors, again, I will consider that a failure, because they need to move her storyline forward. Like, I don't know what they could do with her next, but she needs to go and commit her first, get her first act of revenge or something.
Right.
You know, because, again, if she's still in Braavos by the end of this season, at the House of Black and White, it's a failure. She needs to move, do something else. If not, why show?
In all these major characters, rather than, you know, being, you know, a big, you know, kind of like cliffhanger.
Say it again?
You don't want to see cliffhangers for season 6. So for a lot of these major characters, you want to see things get accomplished, where obviously everything's going to, you know, have, you know, be kind of a stepping stone for a lot of these characters getting to where they ultimately want to in this battle for the Game of Thrones, for the Iron Throne.
I just want to interrupt you, because this is also on my mind too. I need Jon Snow to do something. I need the White Walker, there to be an advancement of this White Walker story. Now, I feel like
we haven't mentioned that yet.
Now, I feel like on one hand, I need there to be an advancement. On the other hand, I feel like that's something they're saving for their final season. Like, their final season is going to be this battle of the White Walkers. So I feel like that's fine. They're pushing it back, but
that's how the show opened.
I know. That's what I'm saying, and that's what I think.
The crazy thing is it going to come? Are we going to see that arc where it comes full circle, like you see in a lot of newspaper articles, movies? You know, you can go on and on.
They are, and that's, on one hand, that's great. On the other hand, it's kind of predictable, because that's what we know is going to happen. But I'm excited for that. But I need to see an advancement on the wall. Like, again, at the end of the season, if Jon is just still at the wall, doing random things, I consider that a failure. Like,
I was going to, you know, you mentioned Jon Snow, and I would be remiss to, you know, leaving the program without mentioning him. And would you have been okay with him taking Jon Stark and helping Stannis attack the Boltons in Winterfell?
I don't know. I'd have to think about that. I mean, on one hand, it would have been really cool, because it would have been a change of scenery. On the other hand, it kind of would have betrayed him as a character, because he does take his oath seriously. I mean, he may deviate them from time to time, but ultimately he wants to be a brother of the Night's Watch, and to do that would betray who he is as a Stark. And that's kind of the problem with the Starks, is they're loyal to a fault. And that's what this character is, and that's kind of the point of Jon Snow, is he could take the easy way and become a Stark right here and now. Stannis is making that. Or he could live up to his character and be faulty like he is and say, no, I'm going to stay at this wall, even though I could be, you know, very important. So I like that as a character. They stay at the wall. And to be honest, though, David, if he did say, you know what, I'm going to be a Stark, we'd lose the whole wall, which is clearly a big set piece for this show. You know, if he leaves the wall, then we don't have the wall. I mean, Sam is a big character, but he's not a main character. We're not going to follow Sam unless Jon is there.
Right.
So we need someone at the wall. Jon's going to stay at the wall. I'm fine with that. But something needs to happen at the wall. Last season we had this invasion of the not the White Walkers, the Wildlings. They lost. Stannis knocked them down. So what's going to happen now? I mean, is Jon just fixing up the wall? Like, what's the rest of Jon's story this season? So I need, again, going back to my main point, these stories need to advance. I think some stories are advancing. The King's Landing story is, they push that forward. Jon's obviously the Lord Commander at the wall, but so what? What now that he's the Lord Commander? They need to move that story forward. I need action there. I need a war at the wall. I need something to happen. I'm not saying it won't happen. I think Game of Thrones picks up at the end. I'm very sure by the end of the season I'll be very excited. But again, if the season ends and Dany is still a Marine, if Arya is still at the House of Black and White, and if Jon is still at the Wall, I feel like we're just spinning our wheels. And this is a show that where it's going to go 7 seasons, maybe could have been 6 seasons.
Yeah, probably 7 seasons, and definitely looking forward to the rest of season 5. Josh, it's always a pleasure reuniting with the High Sparrow himself, and glad to see you are doing well down south.
Always a pleasure. We're doing well here in Durham. Fortunately, up at the Wall, it's a little too cold for us.
Yeah, well, today was beautiful, sunny and 70, so...
I hear there were some riots going on in King's Landing, so I don't want to be anywhere near there.
Right, we will. That's a topic for another time. We'll leave that to the CNN and Foxes of the world to discuss. Josh, always a pleasure, like I mentioned. And as a broadcast reminder, episode 4 of this season 5 will air Sunday, 9 p.m. Eastern Time. The Sons of the Harpy. Is that correct? Is that the name of the episode?
Yes.
Sons of the Harpy. So I think there will be a lot of stuff taking place in Marine. So you definitely want to stay tuned. And of course, Josh and I should be back to do round 2 as he smirks on camera of this season 5. But that's another talk for another time. And don't forget to check out Huey Magoo's in Orlando, Florida for the best chicken fingers in town. From the Subway Fresh broadcast booth for Josh Miller, I'm Dave Leno. So long and thanks for watching Essos2Westeros. Good night.